So I'm still trying to figure out what the identity of this channel is. I know there's a bunch of things that I didn't want it to be, and among those was a political channel because, like, in this world, who needs more political commentators? But I think I've realized that there are gaps to fill as far as discourse goes online, if you can believe it. And that's what I'm making this video about. Also, I'm doing my makeup because I need something to distract me. I will explain what I'm doing as I'm also explaining the concepts I'm going to explain. So what I'm doing now is just washing my face with a simple facial cleanser. I feel like I shouldn't name brands. It is soap. Soap and water works just fine. I use these little pad things because I have sensory issues, and I'm gonna pause for a second because I need to then get the soap off of my face. I have a pimple patch on. I'm gonna keep it on just because that thing is really inflamed underneath there. And then I'm going in with a moisturizer. It's cold out, so I have to kind of really layer it on. So hold on, I'm gonna check what time it is. I'm gonna have to do this in one take. This is gonna be a mess. So what prompted me to make this video is, well, the murder happened, and the day after, or maybe 2 days after, I think it was 2 days after, because I didn't want to go out to a protest myself because I have sensory issues. I ended up watching a live stream, a little bit of the big one that happened in Minneapolis by a channel called Status Quo Media. And this channel, like, they're clearly like a left-wing channel. I haven't watched enough of their stuff to narrow down an ideology. It was just the first thing that I happened to click on when I searched YouTube for Minneapolis protest live stream. But I'm gonna wait for my moisturizer to dry before I do anything. But the journalist guy who is doing the typical internet journalist and real life journalist thing of walking up to random people with microphones and just letting them say anything they want, he was going around and doing interviews. And one of the questions that he kept asking people was, does this feel like America? And while some people had like nuanced takes on it, obviously, the consensus seemed to be, no, this doesn't feel like America. This doesn't represent American values. The murder of an innocent person by law enforcement is not something we Americans stand for. And that pisses me off as a black person, as a queer person, as a person who, like, reads. I find that very upsetting. I find it upsetting because it often feels like I'm living in a completely separate universe from other people, from most people, and not just on a level of neurodivergency, on a level of you and I have not seen the same news, so you and I have a fundamentally different perception of what reality is, what people do, and what happens to people. All right, I think my moisturizer is dry enough for this to not come off on my face. So I found that upsetting, and I think it speaks to a problem that has gone unaddressed on all sides of the political spectrum, but it's most concerning, on the side of people who agree with me on most things, and that is this idea of American exceptionalism. Most discussions of American exceptionalism describe it as the idea that America is the best country in the world. And that's true. That's a part of it, but that's not all of it. I read this really good book called American Exceptionalism and American Innocence that didn't tell me anything I didn't already know, but it was a very cathartic read, and I think it very succinctly communicates the smaller parts of American exceptionalism that people might miss. A big thing is the idea that things like freedom, equality, free enterprise, if you're one of those people, the idea that things like that are inherently and fundamentally American ideas. As if, like, before the 1700s, nobody was ever free before. And that's something discussed in the book, is how American exceptionalism has to be accompanied by a sense of historical amnesia. And that's what I'm really seeing in the responses of the protesters who are like, no, this isn't America. Because these are people who live in Minneapolis. This shooting happened like 2 steps away from two steps away from where George Floyd was murdered. A lot of these people were protesting in 2020, and it just doesn't occur to them in the moment that those two things are connected. It's kind of sad. I don't know exactly where I'm going with this eyeliner look today. I thought I would connect it here, but it's got a mind of its own. I'm fucking up, it's so over. I have to look at my notes. I had to rewatch to remind myself where the hell I was going. Anyway, and I'm of course not implying that police violence started in 2020, but it's like, how do you get across to someone who is really into the whole America good, America awesome thing, even as they are witnessing these extreme cases of state violence? How do you get across to these people that the police in the United States started as literal fucking slave catchers, and they never stopped being slave catchers, and ICE are basically slave catchers, but instead of black people, they're trying to move Hispanic people to places where they will be more miserable because they just don't like them because of the color of their skin. It's hard to, again, the whole different universes thing, it's very difficult. I don't know who my target audience is, really. People who relate to this don't need to hear it. People who need to hear it will dismiss it. So I hope that the people watching are entertained, at least. Okay, so pencil's done. I'm gonna go over this in liquid because I hate myself. And I want to make my life harder. I guess, I don't know, something else that has been really upsetting is seeing the police take advantage of this sort of historical amnesia. What's happening in many police departments, I've definitely seen the Minneapolis police pulling this shit, or at least lawmakers talking about the Minneapolis police use this rhetoric. The police in my own County as well have been jumping onto this train, and it's depicting themselves as like the good, noble law enforcement, and depicting ICE as the wrong, evil law enforcement. And the worst thing about it for me is it seems that this propaganda is really working on a lot of people. I heard a story repeated by a friend of mine about a video he watched where a woman called the police because ICE showed up at her door, and the police predictably told her to follow instructions. They are in cahoots. I guess if you are one of those people who, like, thought that maybe this time the police would be different, I want to make it clear to you that the only people who can save y'all is y'all selves, you know? The only people who can stop ICE coming into a community is the community itself. I really thought I would have more profound insights on the current political moment. Turns out speaking off the cuff, unscripted, is not exactly my forte. Turns out skills require practice. This is, if you don't understand what I'm doing right now, is I'm trying to identify whether my makeup is symmetrical or not and what I need to change. Alright, eyeliner is done. Now it's the time to decide whether I want to do anything else, which depends largely on how much time I have left. And I got 10 minutes. I've got a set of face paints that I'm still figuring out how to use. They're pretty fun. Yeah, living in the United States right now is kind of a fucking nightmare. And I don't want to discount people's belief that things are worse than they have been, because they certainly are. We haven't experienced this specific version of American fascism before, so I understand being distressed. I'm distressed. It's just, I feel that a lack of understanding of the roots of it make it so our distress has no direction to go in. Because if you don't know how people have gotten out of this in the past, and what's worked and what hasn't worked, it's a paralyzing feeling, definitely. I realize this doesn't photograph very well. That's fine. I'm fine with it. So here's the finished look. I did not do anything to my lips because I'm going to be wearing a mask. It's like a tree falling in the forest. I think it's morally correct to shoot and kill ICE. No, I can't end the video like that. If you like this video, if you like me, you can do the fucking, this is so humiliating.